evening. How are you?
How you doing?
No, next time to run.
That's why I moved up closer this time. Yes, that's right. Well, usually Vinny sits up there and he... Yeah.
Good evening. We want to welcome City Planning here to talk about the M1 Hotel text amendment, Amanda. We also want to do a little bit of housekeeping. I've welcomed Barry Grudenchik, Councilman Grudenchik. He was called to the principal's office just for a second. Betty was called to the principal's office before too, but I was in her office, it seemed, you know, she's more the principal. In accordance with section 13 of the Borough Board bylaws, the following vice chair has been designated by their respective chairs to serve as alternates at the meeting of October 16th, 2017. First chair, Walter, I didn't see Walter, hello. Walter Sanchez for Vinnie Curie, Board 5. First chair, Reverend Edward McKay for Adrian Adams, Community Board 12. All in, can I accept a motion? Jean Kelty, second Christine Haber. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Thank you very much. Motion is passed. We have the Department of City Planning here, just to be clear. This is an informational meeting. This is not the official meeting where we need to vote on the text amendment as a borough board. City Planning has come early, so that we can just have the information before the scoping meeting on Tuesday. Is that correct?
No, on October 26th.
Just like I said, October 26th is the scoping meeting at City Planning. And so we wanted to give folks the information before that meeting so that you would have it and be able to bring it back to your board. But it is not the official meeting. So for those that thought we had a vote or that we were going to vote next time, this is not it. If you recall, we had a lot of discussions about this text amendment when we were going through the storage facility text amendment. And there were several questions as to why hotels were also not included in it. And so I'm hoping that City Planning answers those questions and talks about what we're doing here now. So, officially, DCP is preparing a zoning text amendment that would create a new City Planning Commission special permit for hotels, to be clear, in M1 districts. In preparation for public review of the proposed zoning text amendment, DCP has scheduled a public scoping meeting on October 26th. The proposed special permit for hotels in M1 districts is another part of the Mayor's 2015 initiative to preserve space in manufacturing districts for manufacturing or industrial development and jobs. The Mayor's initiative to preserve space in M1 districts is driven by an acceleration of as-of-right, non-manufacturing, or industrial development in these areas. With us is Amanda Iyer, a project manager with Department of City Planning. Welcome, Ms. Iyer, and please begin.
Thank you very much. Is this working? It's working?
It's working?
Yes, okay. Yeah, this works. So good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Amanda Iyer. I'm here with my colleagues Jennifer Grovell, Jackie Sanwu, and Scott Solomon from the Queen's office, from the City Planning Queen's office. So we're here to present a zoning text amendment as you just heard, and we have seen that many new hotels have opened in light manufacturing districts, the M1 districts, since 2010. We understand that this has generated concern among communities, and the department itself is also concerned about balanced neighborhood growth. So this is why we're taking action now. As you heard before, this is informational, so we are starting the public environmental review process, not the public land use review process yet. And October 26th is when we're holding the scoping meeting. It's at 2 p.m. in the afternoon at 22 Reed Street in the financial district. And you can also submit written comment. There's a 10-day period after which you can submit written comment to the environmental review. So this, is primarily comment on the draft scope of work to consider what kind of analysis city planning should be doing, what problems do we need to be looking at, what do you think, what are the issues with hotel development? And this is less about the proposal itself, although you can also comment on that, but it's really about what city planning should be studying. So because this is early in the point, ULURP is still many months away, and you will have more opportunities to comment on this and vote on this as we go through the public process. And you also may first remember hearing about this in the context of the 10-point industrial action plan, and that was announced just 2 years ago. And at the time, the hotel special permit that was announced was just for the IBZs, the industrial business zones. What we are presenting to you today is a hotel restriction that affects all M1 districts, not just the ones that are in IBZs. So we have since expanded the geographic scope because we recognize that issues that had to do with hotel development weren't just affecting IBZs, but also other M1 districts, also other light manufacturing districts. So the overall context here is that New York City is growing. It's a very successful city, and there are now over 8.5 million people living in the city, and we've grown even faster than expected. We've reached the population projections for 2020 as of last year, and because the population is growing, there is a need for more housing, and not only a need for more housing, but also a need for more services. People need places to shop, they need places to buy groceries, and they need places to get health care. And at the same time, the city economy has been thriving. Also, there are now 4 million private sector jobs in the city. And since the recession, there has been substantial job growth in many different sectors. And growth is particularly strong in food services and professional services like law, accounting, architecture, advertising firms. There's also been growth in healthcare and retail, and all of these jobs require places to go. So we need places to live, housing, we need places to access services, and we also need space for jobs. So this unprecedented growth in both population and employment has led to an increased competition for space in the city, and the city being surrounded by water has only so far it can grow. What we've seen over the last few years is that light manufacturing districts, M1 zones, are increasingly becoming areas of opportunity. So if we look at the land uses and the buildings in these areas, in M1 district is where most of the land, where there is more underbuilt land than in other zoning districts, and there is also more vacant land than in other districts. This is not looking at other manufacturing districts like heavier industry, but considering like the places where you could still have a chance to really build much. So with increasing population and employment numbers, the Department of City Planning needs to ensure that there are sufficient opportunities to grow industrial uses, and this is something we talked about quite a lot for self-storage, but also other kinds of uses such as commercial growth, business growth, residential growth, and institutional growth. And the largest areas of opportunity are specifically the M1 districts. But if we look at the rules, the zoning rules for these places, overall they haven't changed much since 1961 when the zoning was first enacted. So some of the rules that define the zoning framework for M1 districts we think should generally be revisited. There are several of these rules, but the ones that we are going to talk about today are the ones that govern hotel development. Why we're taking action now is because we see that since 2010 there has been a proliferation of hotels in these areas in the city, and we're concerned about hotels taking away from balanced neighborhood growth and from opportunities for other kinds of growth, because as we said, this is a growing city that has many different needs. So the first question is, why have so many hotels been built in these areas? And this is mainly for two reasons. The first is that the tourism has grown so much in the city. So last year there were 61 million visitors, so in 2016, 61 million visitors to New York City, and this is up from 44 million visitors just a little bit over a decade ago. So there has been an increase of almost 40% in just the number of people who come and visit New York City. And so the strong growth in visitor numbers has also led to an increase in demand for hotel rooms, and the market has followed by offering those rooms. Right now, in the city, there are about 600 hotels with 116 hotel rooms. And if we look at just 7 years ago, in 2010, there were only 84,000 hotel rooms. So we went from 84,000 hotel rooms to 116,000 in just 7 years, meaning about 30,000 rooms have been delivered in the last few years. And so there has been a lot of hotel product put on the market in the last few years, but right now there are another 24,000 more rooms that are under construction in the city. So the pipeline is also very significant. One thing I'd just like to highlight is that the hotel market used to be extremely focused on Manhattan, and that has changed slowly over the last few years. Manhattan is still the most diverse and important hotel market in the city, but there are now hotels in all parts of the city, as you know. So in the last decade, the room inventory tripled in Brooklyn and doubled in Queens. Queens is the second largest hotel market after Manhattan. It has about 12,000 rooms. And there are also hotels in the Bronx and Staten Island, which, there used to be a few years ago, there was almost no hotels in those boroughs.
Amanda, can we get copies of the PowerPoint and we'll send it to the district?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you email it to us, we can email it around. Is that
Okay.
okay with everybody? You guys are all right? Okay.
It's a lot of numbers.
It's a lot of numbers. And we also, I'm gonna cite a few more numbers. There is also on our website a report looking at that studied the hotel market and tourism industries in New York City, and they took a pretty fine-grained approach, not only citywide, but looked at each borough, and then within each borough at different geographic submarkets. So if you would like more information, you can find that on the webpage for this proposal specifically, and download the whole report. It's pretty extensive. It was several months of research that some consultants did for us. And then considering the distribution of hotels, which zoning districts have they gone into? About just over 10% of the existing rooms are in M1 districts, but almost a third of the ones that are now under construction are in M1 districts. So there has been a shift towards these zoning districts, and this is for the second reason why we've seen more hotel development in these areas. And if you look at the presentation, and if you have printouts, or once you have it in your email, you see it in a bit more detail. But we modeled what different uses what buildings for different uses could look like on the same zoning lot, and it really shows that hotels can take advantage of a zoning lot so much more than many other of the permitted uses. So, for example, hotels can take advantage of, or can have the ability to use all of the permitted floor area ratio, FAR, that's permitted on a site. So many other uses in industrial, in the M1 zones, like industrial uses would only want the ground floor and can't really take advantage of FAR that is technically permitted but doesn't benefit those uses. Then hotels work as infill development. They can work on very small sites. They can be skinny buildings, right? Whereas other uses that are allowed, such as office or industrial uses, tend to need a lot of space. They're more space intensive and horizontal, and wouldn't work on the small lots. Furthermore, there are height and setback regulations in M1 districts that allow for tower development, and those are those kind of skinny towers that you see. Most other uses that are allowed in M1 districts wouldn't typically cite as towers. Even office developments don't usually go into like small skinny towers, but tend to like larger floor plates. And finally, the parking and the loading requirements are very low for hotels in the M1 district. So if you compare that to an office use, for example, and that's why the office is so small on this site, is because office uses are coupled with very high parking requirements, which makes building an office building very difficult in such a zoning district. And here's a map of Queens that shows the existing hotels, and those are under construction or in the pre-construction process. What you're seeing is that the ones in red, so the points that are in red show which hotels are in M1 districts, and the ones in blue show hotels that are in other zoning districts. So hotels are permitted in many commercial districts, and they're also permitted in sort of the mixed use or special districts, and this map accounts for that. So as of the first quarter of 2017, Queens had about 12,000 hotel rooms in 116 hotel properties, and growth has been quite extraordinary in the last 10 years. So the number of hotel rooms has doubled in Queens, And even despite the really extensive growth in supply, the occupancy rates have remained very high in Queens. A very important demand driver in Queens are the existence of both of the airports, so LaGuardia and JFK definitely contribute to demand for hotel rooms in the borough. And then there are also other drivers such as the existence of business districts in Flushing, in Jamaica, in Long Island City, and the proximity to Manhattan.
Do each one of those dots, they don't mean one hotel, right? They mean a cluster of hotels.
No, each dot is one hotel.
Also, Councilman Rodentia.
I think you're missing some.
Yeah, you are.
It is possible.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's possible.
So I was trying to give you the benefit of the doubt, right? So we do think that there are some missing.
There's some missing along the LIE. There's two about 111.
Okay. Yeah, please.
And then there's one in Ward 8 that's on the other side, in Fresh Meadows, just outside, in a notch in the special district, just outside the special. But that one's open.
That one's open.
But they're two right along, next to each other, right along on the LIE, where it used to be a cinema.
Okay. Yeah, we'll look into it.
If it's a homeless shelter,
There are
it's not
definitely
there, but
at times
it's a homeless
gaps in the
shelter,
data. We
it's
try
not
to do
a
our best, but
And that's-
there are a lot of
that's
hotels.
Probably 300 or 400 hotel rooms.
Oh, okay, so that we should definitely be including.
Do we know if they're in the R district or the district? I know it's separate.
No, I think one of them is in the NOR district, and the one in Ward 8, no, one for Steve. The one in Ward 8, I think, is in R, and the other two are right along the LIE in Ward 11. That was commercial property.
No,
I think one of
it was
them
R3 too.
Okay. Not good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can you just, how are you double checking and verifying where the hotels actually are?
So this map includes STR data, which is a private data collecting firm that it's proprietary. So our consultants actually bought the data for the existing hotels, and then the ones that are under construction or in the pre-construction process is a data pool that we do from the Department of Buildings website. But sometimes there's a little gap, and especially I think the STR data that this is based on for the existing hotels doesn't seem to capture all of it, especially if there are hotels that open within this year, within the last 8 months. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask if I can, the chairs, when we send you this PowerPoint presentation, which Vicki will do tomorrow, because you send it to us tomorrow morning? All right, so Vicki will send it out to you tomorrow morning. Can you please double check it? And if there's any corrections on the hotels, we can send it back to you, Amanda, right?
Please,
And that way
yes.
you have it.
That would be very helpful.
Okay. All right, and that way it becomes part of your presentation.
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's consider that a input into your scoping.
We definitely like to have good information
Excellent.
and not
Thank
flawed
you.
information, so. And regarding the pipeline, which, this should be pretty accurate because it's from Department of Buildings data, although there may have been certain filings that have been in the last 2 months that we haven't been able to all keep track of. But there are about 10,000 hotel rooms in the pipeline. This includes both some that are already into construction and some that are in the pre-construction process, so they've just filed applications at the Department of Buildings but haven't had permits issued yet. So just in terms of thinking about the pre-construction and the under construction, and because we have seen so many hotel rooms delivered in the last few years, we do think that not all of the hotel projects that have filed permits will actually complete and go through construction, because there is a point where we have seen some signs of market saturation, and developers are not all of them are going to go forward with their project. At least that's what we think and how we are approaching the environmental review to speak to that portion already. The issues posed by the hotel development, so conflicts posed by a hotel can be very different in every site, every neighborhood, but largely we're distinguishing between hotels that really are in actively industrial M1 districts and hotels that are in M1 districts, but those M1 districts are a bit more mixed use. They may already have many commercial uses. In some instances they have some housing developments also. So for the active industrial areas, it's relatively straightforward that a hotel development and industrial businesses have potential land use conflicts where the industrial businesses generate noise and truck traffic, loading and pollution and other nuisances, and those generally could conflict with hotels. And hotels could also harm the effectiveness of an industrial business in such an area, because then hotel guests complain about the activity of these industrial businesses, and so their presence is not mutually beneficial. And as you see also from the photos, or you probably know from your own experience, like hotels in these areas tend to be physically out of context. These are fairly low-rise neighborhoods, and then the hotels tend to be much taller than all other buildings. And then in the mixed-use M1 areas, those tend to have less industrial uses, more retail and office, in some cases also residential, like I said. And hotels don't necessarily present the same direct conflicts here, but their development can detract from opportunities for other kinds of growth. If the city wanted to gear this neighborhood more towards employment growth, or maybe in the future rezone to allow for more housing, then the fact that hotels would already be occupying the neighborhood could be problematic. Also, hotels tend to bring along development that is more favored towards tourists and serves tourists rather than maybe the needs of locals. Finally, the design of these hotels is generally also out of context. They're set back from the street. They don't have glazed storefronts, and so they don't necessarily contribute to the neighborhood or the pedestrian experience. So this is what we're proposing. We're proposing a City Planning Commission special permit for new hotels, and I'll explain what a special permit is in a second, but you've probably dealt with this before. And the special permit would not only apply for hotels, but also for motels, tourist cabins, and botels, just so that we are consistent in terms of thinking about accommodations. But we can say, it's pretty safe to say that we don't see any new motels being built in New York City these days. We think that a case-by-case, site-specific review process would let everybody consider the appropriateness of a new hotel in the actively light industrial areas where the hotels and the existing industrial uses are potentially incompatible, and also in the more mixed-use areas where the city may want to direct growth towards other employment sectors or additional housing. And that City Planning Commission special permit would also still allow for hotels to serve the needs of the tourism industry when it's appropriate. We're proposing to apply, and there's an overview map on the next slide or coming in the presentation, but we are proposing to exempt certain areas. There are not many, but first of all, the proposal wouldn't apply to mixed-use districts or special districts, which are M1/R. So this, for example, wouldn't apply to the Long Island City Special District. And then we're also proposing to exclude the airport properties themselves, both JFK and LaGuardia, and some M1 districts that are immediately adjacent to the airport. And that's because we think that in these areas, the hotels could actually serve the airport and not conflict with the objectives of the city for those areas. So additionally, we're also proposing to not require a special permit for hotels that are temporary housing for the homeless. This means that the rules for the siting of homeless shelters wouldn't change according to this proposal, and they would continue to be permitted as of right. So this wouldn't do anything about the siting of homeless facilities.
Homeless hotels, not shelters, just FYI.
No shelters. So this
Shelters
is
are allowed
proposing.
as of right in the M1?
So this is
Permanent housing?
Well,
No. The shelters can only locate in an M1 district if they're filed as these group 5 as a transient. So it has to be a transient facility. And this would not affect that if it's operated under contract with.
I'm just making it clear that the mayor has a 5-year permanent plan for shelters as opposed to hotels and transient housing.
Yes.
I'm just trying to make it clear to the chairs that we're not talking about the permanent shelters.
No.
We're talking about the transient homeless, I guess, more hotels, and the actual shelters that he hopes to be the final version of this plan.
that's true, because occupancy always has to remain transient in any building, whether it's purpose-built or not. It has to be transient. What the special permit process does, and you've probably seen this before, but it's a discretionary action that is subject to full ULURP review, and it can modify use restrictions, in this case for hotels, if certain conditions that are explained in the zoning resolution are met. And so if this proposal is enacted, any hotel development in an M1 district would have to apply for a special permit and would be subject to full ULURP. So there would be community board review, resident review, borough board review, and then the application would go to the city planning commission, and finally the council would typically also vote on it, although the council doesn't have to. We estimate that the total length of receiving or applying for and obtaining a special permit is about 2 years. This includes the pre-application process that where land use and environmental applications have to be completed. And well, just overall, because of the length and the difficulty of the process, we don't expect that many developers would be applying for this special permit. So we could see some special permit applications for large projects, for projects that are near attractions that would make developers want to go forward. But overall, we think that a special permit is quite a significant deterrent to building a hotel in an M1 district if this were enacted. So this includes the map that shows which areas would actually be affected and which areas wouldn't be affected by the action. It excludes publicly owned sites or sort of utilities, rail yards, because hotel development wouldn't happen there in either way, basically. But so you can see that in orange are the M1 districts where hotel development would be restricted according to the action, and in blue are the areas where hotel development would still be permitted as of right if this proposal were adopted. We also did already share maps by community board with the borough president's office, and those can be shared with every community board, of course, so that you have a more detailed, zoomed-in version of what this actually looks like. So overall, and I'm explaining this because it's in the environmental review documents, and this is also what the scoping meeting is about. Is largely about, I'll just explain what our reasonable worst case development scenario says about what's going to happen in the future with this proposal. So overall, our analysis has shown that the current hotel development boom isn't so likely to continue, that the supply of hotel rooms has largely caught up with demand, and so what we're seeing is that we projected demand for about 28,000 hotel rooms on a citywide basis by 2028, which is the time that we are basing our analysis on. And right now, the pipeline is actually 38,000 new rooms. So there is definitely a sense that not all of the projects that are currently in the pre-construction process or that aren't under construction yet will materialize. Some of those will delay construction. They might change their mind as to including a hotel instead of maybe an office building, or they might opt to do something else instead of a hotel because the market saturation is approaching. Overall, the projects that have building permits issued would best, and this is because we have rules that are drafted that way. And the principal action would be to redirect hotel development from the M1 districts, where the special permit would in the future apply, to areas where hotel development would still be permitted as of right. However, in some geographic submarkets, this doesn't really change much because we're not expecting much more hotel product over what we have already seen today. In other geographic submarkets, this could result in somewhat more of a change. For example, in Long Island City, there is still a lot of hotel construction in the M1 portion, and we could imagine that some of those wouldn't actually happen because of this action, and there may be a little bit of a shift towards the mixed-use area in Long Island City, the mixed-use zoned area. The same in Jamaica, where there's also a pretty significant hotel market. There could be a slight shift, although around Jamaica most of the hotels are already in the commercial district. So an M1 restriction wouldn't change that much over what is already happening today, but still there could be a shift in development as we have projected analyzing this. we're almost getting to the questions portion, but so first, just the overall timeline. This was first publicly announced in 2015, and we first been studying this issue for IBZs, and then we expanded it to include all M1 districts. And so this is why it took longer and why we're here today. We got a better understanding of the hotel and tourism industries in the city, and we came up with the proposal. So the next milestone is the scoping meeting, and I'm sure you want to know when we're going to refer it out. The city, we are targeting referral in the spring of 2018, but this will be subject to the scoping meeting, the number of comments we receive, the amount of analysis that we have to do, and that could, you know, that could mean that referral would happen at another time, but we are aiming for spring 2018. So finally, there is more information about the proposal on our website. There are also the details of the environmental review on the documents, although you should have all received packages in the mail. We also have an email address, which is m1hotels_dl@planning.nyc.gov, m1hotels_dl. And yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions, and we're also happy to talk about this proposal more now.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I also just want to note for folks, and I've said it before, the city planning is very good at reaching out. Whether we agree or disagree on the topic, they're always very good at reaching out, and I want to thank you for that. So just two quick questions, and much of it we spoke about when we met, but I'd like everyone just to hear the questions and know the responses. Why are we just doing the special permit for the whole city, for hotels? I mean, it seems like residential areas would be even more appropriate, if not as appropriate, for hotels, for the community to have a say in it, and for the communities to be able to review it. Have we considered doing the whole city? Have we considered doing all designations?
So, you were just mentioning a hotel that was in a residential district. I don't know. Yeah, so I don't know if there was a certain anomaly there, but usually hotels are not permitted as of right by zoning in residential districts.
It's right off, there's an exit ramp right off the expressway there, and it's within the appropriate fee that it's 1,000 or 1,500.
Okay.
And that's why they picked that location.
Yeah, so in certain
They call it
commercial,
terrible.
in certain commercial overlays within 1,000 feet. So if this is in our district that has a commercial overlay within 1,000 feet of an expressway exit,
Yeah,
there are not many sites in the city like that, but I
It's an
guess they found
R32,
one.
and it was about to be down zone. And they got their foundation in the day before the down zone.
Oh, okay. So generally, hotels are not permitted in residential districts unless there's a commercial overlay. So in some commercial overlays, hotels are allowed, and so that's why we wouldn't have to be discussing residential districts anyway. But so in hotels now are allowed in C4, C5, C6, and C8 districts, and those are widely mapped in Manhattan and not very widely mapped outside of Manhattan. And you know, frankly, it's a big industry in the city, and it contributes significantly to economic development. And there are places where we think hotel development is appropriate in the commercial districts, which tend to be near subway stations, near transit, where people travel, where there are businesses that also need hotels. So in those places, we think hotels are appropriate and don't. You know, generally appropriate. There may be neighborhood plans, there may be certain ideas for certain areas, but overall, in commercial districts, we think hotels
So
don't really
why would it
harm.
hurt to do it? I mean, if it makes more sense to put hotels in manufacturing areas like you're saying, although I have to tell you, in Queens, it just doesn't seem to be. In Queens, we got a bunch of hotels in C2s, which, you know, are like R6As, R6Bs, R3s. So we do have quite a bit in Queens that are in residential areas. But I guess I would like city planning to really consider, if there's time, the scoping hasn't started, to really do citywide. I mean, that's from my opinion. I don't know if that I share the opinion. I do worry that you might get a sense of maybe pushing hotels in certain areas. But if it's citywide, you sort of defeat that problem, right? Because then everybody has a say on where they go. I'm glad that we're taking this step, but I would really like the city to consider that. And the second question is, you said it doesn't have to go to the council. My understanding is special permits are mandatory.
No, it would go to the city council.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought you said discretionary.
No, I think it's
to.
subject to, the council can decide, anyway, I'm sorry, I think the council can decide to.
They can, yeah, I mean, and probably.
Exactly, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
my understanding, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that the council, this is a mandatory review by the city council as a special permit.
Right.
I'm assuming,
Oh,
it's not a call-up, as we say.
I can clarify that. I'd like to, yeah.
We're pretty sure, right?
But I don't think we anticipate the council not taking it if it is.
Yeah,
Okay, but that's a different, anticipating the council not taking it up is an extremely different statement than it's mandatory that it goes through the council, right? So, can we just, I'm pretty sure that we're right, but
Okay.
let's just double check that.
We'll double check, yeah.
We should definitely get that right.
And Betty was first?
Yeah, I agree with the borough president in terms of why this should not be applicable to all zones. You know, when they look at Queens in particular, and you look at the C2 and the C4 areas, you know, particularly the C2 area, where the hotel might be within the 1,000 feet of a roadway. You know, no matter where you are in Queens, when you're in our commercial overlay zones, you're right on top of people's homes as well. You know, and it is an issue when facilities are being cited. You know, having a special permit applied to all hotel construction would address at least the ability of a community to have some say-so over what's being developed. You know, the other question I have relates to why exclude the areas adjacent to the airports? And how would you define areas adjacent to the airports?
So the reason for the exclusion is because hotels, we think that hotels are appropriate there because the airport itself creates a
I don't
need.
think the community would argue with you on that hotels are appropriate to an airport. But when we are talking about tourism and we're talking about the hotel industry, you know, when, at least in my area along the JFK Strip, many of those hotels have been turned into the transient homeless uses. And that's nothing to say to the people that we place there. But it does speak to the issue if there is a need for hotel rooms.
Right.
You know, if there's demand, why are they empty and being used for that purpose? You know, so like, something's wrong in that equation. But certainly, you know, we should not exclude those areas. I'm not going to argue with you over the on-airport hotels like the Ramada or the new one that's being constructed at JFK, but certainly all of the hotels in that region.
And we have more detailed, we shared more detailed maps, but just to point to you what areas we are talking about, it's the M1 districts that are just south. So these are these are M1 districts that we're proposing to exclude.
But we have hotels there that are in C zones that are, you know, problematic from the point of view of the communities that they're in, because there is no control by the communities as they're developed. You know, having a special permit in place at least gives the community the opportunity to get the necessary information and to have an open discussion on the issue. My soapbox.
I just want to raise the same point for Long Island City. Because now we have two hotels within a half mile of each other. There are now, we have, I think, about 120 families living in them. So I'd like to ensure that we too have a special permit so that we can talk to the community.
So we are proposing to exempt, to not apply the special permit for our homeless facilities. So this hotel special permit would really subject tourist hotels to a special permit, but somebody could build as of right a homeless facility if they got a contract with DHS and building permits. It would have to be a purpose-built transient homeless facility.
What we're seeing in Queens, throughout Queens, are transient hotels being used to shelter the homeless on a transient basis. You know, and some of them are 100% occupancy.
So-
Just read the newspapers this week, across the street from this building. There's
And-
a
and
hotel
what
that
would
was
change?
built for transient purposes. You know, and the policy decisions that are being made are placing communities in a position where they have many, many unanswered questions. Having this type of permit in place for all hotel users allows a community to have input into the processes.
I mean, this plan is not intended to affect the administration's current.
I
policy
understand that, but it gives a
process.
community
Yes, I
the
understand.
ability to address those issues.
Denise, you done?
Well, you're coming Wednesday to land use, correct? We have you on our calendar, CB2?
I don't go to CB2, but I would go
Maybe
to
Alexis?
Alexis Wheeler.
Okay,
She may be the representative.
okay.
Can we, before we, just because I see people on the sides as well, can we go around and can you just tell us which elected officials that you're representing, if you're representing them?
Hello, Emil Silva representing Councilman Richards, he's the chief of staff.
Congratulations. Anybody?
Evia Cardozo representing Councilmember Daniel Drum.
Sean Butler representing Councilmember Van Bramer.
Yanchi Muniz representing Councilmember Barry Goldenchik.
Joe Marbrulli, I'm actually with the city planning.
Well, John's and me?
Yep.
Anybody else?
I'm Andrew Toronto from Senator Connor's office.
Cat Thompson from Senator Thompson.
And I'm Yumei from the mayor's office. I'm also going to be planning as well.
Okay. Jean?
I have a problem just with the idea of what they call a special permit, because I don't know what the rules and regulations are for special permits. It just seems, we get a right to comment, but if they don't like our comments, they just move forward. But it's not like a BSNA application where we know it's in stone, because I've had several issues that came before my board with special permits, and I was even chastised, like, why would I even open up the door? And I said, we have the right to comment, we have the right to comment, but if the comments don't pertain, then I don't understand the special permit component, and that's worries me a little.
So a special permit, and it is discretionary. So the council member can or cannot decide for the council to vote on it. I mean, ostensibly, the governmental elected official
These
works.
chairs are all having public hearings and getting yelled and
Yes.
screamed at, and I have a problem to that fact, because if what I'm going to is just an effort of wasting my time.
So
I
the
don't
dis-
mean to
right.
say it that way, but
The only distinction I can make for you is that now the council member can call it up,
yes.
and they can actually vote no. And they can ask the council to vote no on it if truly it's not wanted in their community.
This is the same council that voted for the plastic bags. So I have a problem when you say that to me. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be facetious, but I am old and I do have a long memory. So I just bring that on the table about special permits.
Okay, you got that?
Yeah, I
Good.
got that. Yeah, I would say just the mere existence of a special permit is a pretty big deterrent in and of itself, actually prevents a lot of projects from happening. So the projects that do come often will, if there's not a good chance of there being support, will often, that will be withdrawn before they get that far, if they ever go into the process to begin with.
Having run through the gas stations and special permits and other things, which is just a rhetoric, because sometimes it's 4 years before it gets to us that they have never moved forward with, and then we're back.
Right, and also we've experienced in other community boards that the people or developers apply for special permits and then never actually utilize them.
That's
They go
correct.
back to the original plan, because a special permit is not required to be followed once it's passed. I think the distinction here, quite honestly, is that right now we have no authority
No,
in M1 zone.
I'm just,
So-
I wish I could see that the special permit was a little more tightly, especially if it was done through the borough president have more of an impact before it gets, I'm not blaming the
Right.
council, I'm
No, I
just saying,
understand.
I just,
We would like to have a way where community input means a lot more at times. I think that that's the frustration. And although we appreciate the fact of having a little more control now, and I think that it's the right thing, but you know, there is a rooted frustration in the lack of responsiveness at times. Not necessarily by your office, but sometimes, but not this time. Next.
Two things. I agree with Betty that we should not exclude around JFK anyway. I can speak of the requirement for a special permit. They should have the same requirements. And can I just ask you in terms of parking regulation, because I think this is something you also have to consider. You said it's a very low parking requirement, but I think the special permit needs to take into account the area in which and what is the adjacent properties, and it shouldn't be a blanket number. There should be a number of factors that determine what the parking requirement is, not just a standard across the board. I think each neighborhood has its own needs, and it shouldn't be blanket. What is the current, you said low parking, what is the current parking requirement?
Well, I mean, it depends on the district.
Well, the M1, we're talking about the M1 district.
Right, but within the
I think
M1.
it depends on the number of rooms of the hotel.
Okay, so what is it for 100 rooms? How
I'm
many?
sorry, I'm trying to remember right now.
We can get back to you on that.
It depends within which M1 district it is, if it's M11, if it's M13,
But it should not be
M5.
blanket. I think the surrounding area has to play a piece in determining the parking requirement.
Understood.
Yeah, and one of the advantages, the flip side of the discretionary permit is that there's some discretion, so the commission can take into consideration other factors relevant to the
Yeah,
neighborhood.
but they tend to go with discretion, leaning towards the developer rather than the existing communities. So I would like it a little more stringent in terms of the parking requirement.
Anybody else? Christine?
I agree with Borough President that it should not be just M1 districts, because as has been already discussed, these hotels have been found themselves in residential areas and so forth. And special permit, I think, is kind of a good thing, because like Borough President says, we now have no control, and then we would have some control, possibly. And I think the community input is very, very important, because when those two hotels came up by me, whoa, and I'll tell you, but I'm not gonna go into detail, but they're still not finished, the one on my side, the one on the other side. But the other side is C8, by the way, where that big one is. That's the C8. So I do think that it's important, and also the airport hotels should have special permits as well. Thank you.
Just a quick comment, because several of you have mentioned that the hotels that are in the commercial overlays or in residence districts. If you know specific ones, like the address, we can look into them and try and figure out what's going on there. It might not be something that, it might not be an issue that we can address. But I think the beginning is to try and understand where they are and how they got there. And then we can better understand and respond to your concerns.
Reverend?
Yes, I agree with the general concession here, that the community should be more involved in this decision-making process. I'm concerned about the parking in general areas, in Jamaica areas, at a premium. So we must consider that very strongly. The parking in residential areas when these good hotels become established. And I'm also concerned with when the hotels are established, what will happen after they're there for a while? Will they eventually turn into a homeless shelter? Because this seems to be what's happening at this point, that the hotels, all the hotels for a time, and then after a while it turns into a homeless shelter. We're concerned with the homeless in the area, but we are concerned with the area's presentation and the people that are there. So these things must be considered strongly, and not only in different areas, but Jamaica area is primarily one of the areas that have been proliferating with a lot of homeless shelters because they started out originally with regular shelters, with regular hotels.
Yeah, maybe just, and we're not, homeless services, it's not our field, but
Right.
we have read the homelessness plan and we do understand that the mayor has, there is a commitment to cease the use of hotels to cite homeless families and individuals in hotels by 2023. So this may, this at least in the longer term would solve your concerns, but in the short term, yeah. But in the long term, the homeless shelter hotel conflict shouldn't be so much on the table, and this here really talks about the commercial hotels, like as we have always understood hotels to be.
Yes. We are talking about hotels. The hotels can become others. And I've seen that happen.
Joe Hennessy, questions?
The special permit should restrict the developer to maintaining it as a hotel for 20 or 30 years. There's a hotel in Long Island City, opened up, was very successful, and all of a sudden it was turned into a women's hotel. Everybody's evicted, and now it's a women's control, and the precinct and the EMS are there every other day. And this is situated across from a church, across from a public school and a private school. It's situated there in the corner on 29th Street and 40th Avenue. Now, if you're going to give me a special permit to build something, there got to be restrictions on what I'm going to do when I build it. There got to be something of a time period, because that's what's happening. The mayor wants to get people off the street, I don't blame that.
Yeah.
But don't be building these hotels and after 4 years, the owner wipes his hands and gets big money to rent the rooms out.
Exactly.
It's not right, and that's what's happening in
That's
New York
what's
City. Whether everybody agrees with it or not, but that's what's happening in New York City. And you coming to us for a special permit to build more hotels, and yet I see this hotel in the corner closed down and put women in there. And, you know, I understand the situation, but it's not right to tell me, Joe, we need more hotels. And I say, hey, Joe, that hotel was just closed down, so it could do for the homeless.
Yes.
And what's going to happen to our communities? It's not right to be asking for more hotels. If I'm a hotel developer, okay. I put my money in there, run it for 5 years, and after that I go back to the city and say, here, I rent it to you as a homeless situation at big money per night. And I have no obligation maintaining food or anything else.
So is there a
There
time?
got to be some consideration given in the special permit. There got to be a time frame put in there.
Okay, is there a time frame that you're considering for the EIS, or what are you studying? What are you doing?
Do you mean including a time requirement for the
Yes,
special permit?
yes, a time that they must stay that actual hotel that they applied for a permit for.
I mean, we wouldn't be any different than any other special permit. I mean, they have a right to build either pursuant to the special permit or pursuant to the underlying zoning. I mean, they would have to operate it as a hotel if that's what they had a certificate of occupancy for. Similar to now, they could work with, get a contract from the city to operate it as a homeless shelter. That would not change. As I mentioned before, this proposal maintains the status quo as far as shelters go. But what it does do is this is not intended to increase hotel development in the city. We actually believe this is going to could potentially very significantly reduce hotel development in certain parts of the city because of the extra discretion and extra review that's required. So to that extent, we would, pardon me, I've got a tickle in my throat. We would expect fewer hotels in M1 districts in the long run. And if the city were to, if a facility were to locate in a manufacturing district, as a homeless shelter, it would have to be a purpose-built facility. And while, which, not be, it couldn't be, you couldn't build a new hotel as a commercial operator without coming through this discussion.
So I think the city's perspective is that they're adding oversight where there wasn't oversight before. But the special, so it's sort of a little of both. But the special permit doesn't really have a time frame. But remember, even if you have a special permit for hotels, you can still build manufacturing. Remember that special permit is just what you can do that's different. The underlying zoning still holds should you not adhere to that special permit. Just wanted to remind everyone, in case we've missed that. Raj, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to reiterate what Joe said. With the hotel across the street, there's 82 units, as we all know, 42 of the units are being used as temporary housing, not as a shelter. I don't know the temporary housing needs, no time frame on it. And, you know, it was very frustrating because there was no community engagement with that. And, you know, I agree with a lot of my other colleagues here and the borough president. It should be citywide and not just the DM.
Claude, Community Board 13?
Yeah, I think Joe makes the point very well that it has to have teeth. It must have teeth, or else. The point is, what has happened is that we've spawned an entirely new business model. The business model where investors know that there's money in creating hotels that will ultimately get a deal from the city as temporary housing. It's a business model. With an average of 45,000 homeless in New York City, on the average, that's going to be sustaining that business model. Are you sensitive and aware of that?
So the one thing that this would definitely change is that a developer couldn't just build a hotel as of right, see if it works or not, see if there is demand or not, and if it doesn't go well enough, or then if the city came and offered a contract, that's not something the developer couldn't first just try the commercial operation and see how that works. They would have to, from the very beginning, if they were going to build a tourist hotel, they would from the very beginning have to apply for a special permit. So that would create clarity, at least in terms of when a building is built, what is it going to be? But other
So
than,
shouldn't it be across the board?
I have to say, I don't envy Department of Homeless Services on this issue. I mean, the city does have a legal mandate to provide shelter, and there is, quite frankly, a very large population that needs to be sheltered, and finding appropriate facilities is not always easy to you know, I guess, to understate the facts. And it's not ideal to do this in commercial hotels, and that's been acknowledged. It's unfortunately a necessity. And this proposal is really trying to treat that policy.
I know, but
So,
the hit is not really on the homeless. The hit is not on the homeless. The hit is on the developers who are capitalizing. That's where it is. The hit is on the developers who are capitalizing. And once they see capital, they will continue. 45,000 average homeless people a year. They will capitalize. So what provisions are you going to put into your plan? You're the planners. What provisions are you going to put in for that? What deterrent are you going to put in for that?
So if I can make a suggestion, the scoping meeting is in 2 weeks. We do want comments pursuant to this meeting, right, as a result of this meeting. Can I ask the chairs to please talk to your district managers, talk to your chairs of land use? I know Sherman's here from Board 9, and I apologize, but we keep some semblance of order here only because it's just the borough board that asks the question. Because when it's really controversial and hot, it's got to just be the borough board that asks the question. So I do apologize, I saw your hand up before. But I do think that this is an opportunity in the next 2 weeks, for the community boards to be part of this from the very beginning. Because remember, all too often, city planning gets to us, not their fault, but because of the process, and the environmental study has already been done, right? Everything's been done. You can't add anything, you can't take anything out. This is an opportunity for the community boards of this borough to really be part of the conversation, like Clyde was saying, like Joe was saying, like Betty was saying, like everyone was talking about, from the very beginning when city planning has a chance to put it in the scoping. And so I just think we should take that opportunity if we can after speaking to our board. And is there a certain period of time after the scoping that they can put in testimony?
Yes, 10 days after scoping.
10 days, so that should cover most of your meetings, I would think. Right? I would think. Gene?
Can I just, I'm assuming we'll take minutes. Tomorrow when we get the presentation from your office, maybe if you would put some of those highlights, like you said, that the thing should be citywide, that the parking is a big concern, that the term limits, so that when I wrote it down, but I'll may forget it, so we will have it when we speak to our TMs.
So the issues we're going to include, are we ready? On the fact that the discussion entailed a citywide special permit application, the exemptions from certain neighborhoods around the airports, the transitional housing, whether that would be included in the citywide, but whether or not that should also require a special permit, the terms of the special permit, and
that per the special permit, the hotel should be there for a certain time.
To operate as a commercial
So we'll include
hotel.
those.
That's parking, which the law was mentioned. Even though it's low, it's, yes.
Okay. And this should all be part of the discussion. At the end of the day, I think that
The council votes on it.
and the special permit is a discretionary action by the council. At the end of the day, I think that we need to keep in mind that we've all wanted more control. And this does give a semblance of more control. I want city planning to understand, I think we're trying to make it better. That's all. But, and there are real issues as to how this and they'll come out in the next few months, right? As well. But Gene, we'll get it to you. But again, I wholeheartedly suggest that the chairs go back to their boards so that we have an opportunity of being part of this from the beginning, during the scoping, during the EIS, not afterwards like sometimes happens, okay? The mayor is coming to Southeast Queens tonight to the high school, for August Martin High School. And so I am going to leave you in the capable hands of my Chief of Staff, Jay Bond. Thank you.
So Amanda, when you send that, will you be sure to include what the current parking requirements are?
Yes, absolutely.
Did anyone else have comments? Questions? No?
I still have one on
Very nice. Hope it's not as good as I came in, but.
I could just like to say that I want one else to be covering the same thing as I don't know why we're not making it.
Seeing no other questions? Thanks City Planning for coming out and running the center.
Thank you very much.
The next meeting of the Queens Borough Board is November 13th at 5:30. Thank you.
Thank you.